All right, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, boys and girls. Welcome to another edition of the Grand Boulevard Coalition. It's a drug-free community initiative. The Grand Boulevard Coalition is made up of several coalitions in the Grand Boulevard community, and I should mention them. I am your host. This is a live show. I'm your host, Bomani. I happen to be the president of the board of the Grand Boulevard Coalition. Our coalition partners consist of the Institute for Positive Living, Reverend Maurice Coverson, Recovery 2000, Miss Izetta Walton, Centers for New Horizons, Miss Krista Hamilton. It also consists of the Bronzeville Community Clubhouse, Mr. John Cook. Our educational liaison is Mr. Lafayette Ford. Oh, thanks for the camera adjustment. Mr. Lafayette Ford is our educational member. Our local government member is the wonderful, great, excellent Alderman of the 3rd Ward, Alderman Pat Dowell. And we also have with us from the church sector or spiritual sector, Greater Harvest Missionary Baptist Church, Pastor Eric Thomas, and his liaison, Miss Lori Rainwright. Again, this is the Grand Boulevard Coalition, a drugs-free community, and we talk about prevention of underage drinking and drugging in the Grand Boulevard community. Our guest today is Mr. Tracy Johnson of the TTJ Group, a great brother in this state. And before I let Tracy go on and we get into the questions about DFC and SAMHSA and all that, I'm just going to add a follow-up from last week, right? I know I got some calls, and I know I'm starting to get a little angst when I start even talking about it, because the violence in the city of Chicago, it makes me that mad. And so I apologize. Someone called me and said, well, I was a little too hyper. Well, yeah. I don't think that you can sit by idly, be a citizen, be a man, be a black man who live in the south side of Chicago, but live in some of these communities where you have these, it's just ridiculous amount of violence. I think about the 70-year-old man, just this weekend. This weekend, right. You have another 13 people murdered. You have 61 people shot. Right. You have a woman that's pregnant with her boyfriend sitting on the porch shot, right. And have to have an emergency birth. You have a 71-year-old man mowing his lawn in his neighborhood, a homeowner.
No harm to nobody.
Harm to no one. And two young men riding down the street on a bicycle, robs him and shoots him. At least one of them did. The point in which is going to get into our subject today, this is a topic that black folks don't really want to deal with. And some call it a third wheel, some call it a taboo subject, but here's the real deal. There are people in our community who have some real mental issues, right? So we can talk about economic deprivation, we can talk about educational deprivation, all of that may in fact play a role. But at the end of the day, there's some real trauma and mental issues that there's folks that we have in our community that we need to address and deal with. And some of it comes back from these hallucinogenic drugs. We're going to talk about this laced marijuana, drinking lean, alcohol at a young age. And this may have been coping mechanisms for these young people in their home. Like I have a gentleman who calls me periodically, talks about drinking alcohol with his children. But we already got a caller. But before we take the call, I want to introduce our guest, Mr. Tracy Johnson. Thank you, Tracy, for joining us.
Thank you for allowing me to be here. I appreciate it.
A great brother in this state, Tracy. So why don't you tell me a little bit about SAMHSA first, and the prevention and these urban coalitions, and then we'll take the call.
I think the biggest thing about SAMHSA, that the Substance Abuse Mental Health Services Administration, it's a part of your money. It's a part of our money, the money that we spend every day to give to the federal government. It is an agency that is charged by Congress to provide substance abuse prevention, substance abuse treatment, and mental health services to our communities across the country. And so a lot of those organizations, that organization is also charged with providing all the training, are the funding to the coalition like we have here in Grand Boulevard, but also to provide as well treatment services, intervention services, recovery services. And those dollars are critical for our communities to understand what's available and make sure that we go after them. They also provide all the training and all those mechanisms. My role, I had worked for SAMHSA as their regional director for training, and I was in charge of the central region. And I provided all the training and technical assistance to the states in the 10-state region. But what I was finding was that those dollars that come down from the federal government to our states or to our nonprofits that are not in our communities, they were not hitting our urban settings, our south side, our west side of Chicago, and other settings around the country. And so now it's critical now that we really understand how to go access those dollars, but then as you get them, how to use them so it effectively impacts our communities much more at a stronger pace than it should be. And those dollars are not being funneled down to our community like they should.
No, and I would agree with you. And so, to your point, I think when you look at marijuana, when you look at, as we were talking before we came on the air, the fact that a lot of our young people in urban Chicago are smoking marijuana laced with fentanyl, laced with embalming fluid, laced with whatever they can find. I mean, you know, and then they're mixing this alcohol with a combination of narcos, pills, and all these, you know. So having the program, having the federal government finally, and I would credit that to people like yourself and others who have pushed this issue in urban communities to get some level of prevention to come to the ground. Before, I would say, and I'm just going to say this, before the Obama administration, how many urban DFCs were there?
Well, that's a good question. Well, before that is probably, I can count them both on my hand. Now there's 698 urban coalitions that have been funded. That was announced last Friday. There's 698 coalitions. There's about 12 of them currently that are really in urban settings like our Grand Boulevard coalition is today. And so really what we have is a specific need that those 12 really focus on impacting and being effective at bringing together all the partners that you mentioned earlier, all those folks working together in a systemic way to impact all levels and all ages of the targeted community. That doesn't happen a lot because in our larger communities, we're finding in our urban setting, there's a lot of turf, there's a lot of mistrust. And so what you all are doing with what we believe with the urban coalitions, they're breaking down those turf issues. They're starting to bring together the folks around the table. We're starting to see more of what one would always call it takes a village, and that same format. That's what we think our urban coalitions are doing around the country with the help of
well, Tracy, the phone lines are lighting up, so let's go right into it and let's take a couple of calls. A caller, you on the air.
Yes, how you doing? This is Reverend Jones, and I wanted to say thank you all for the work that you're doing. And I think, Tracy, you and Obadeli kind of alluded to some of my concerns in relationship to what can we do as urban coalitions to rally together to bring about change. So I want to go a little bit more specifically. What kind of environmental strategies can urban coalitions, particularly in the Midwest, do to promote a safe and drug-free community?
Well, you know, we were going to get to that next, Reverend Jones, but thank you for your call. You always, Johnny on the spot, man. I got to tell you, you know. So, but listen, and thank you for the wonderful work that the Garfield Community Partners are doing over on the West Side. I know you are at the forefront. You know, I was going to talk about these million. The Tribune did Reverend Jones, an article maybe 3 Sundays ago that talked about these $1 million communities. And so Austin was one of those $1 million communities. Now what they talk about is $1 million in police overtime, $1 million in revenue from drugs, $1 million from the crime and the impact of crime is cost. And so really at the end of the day, there's about, and thank you for your call, Reverend Jones. I really appreciate you watching your show later on. There's about 6 communities.
Yes.
In the city of Chicago. 6 communities now. Where 80% of the crime is coming from.
Isn't that amazing?
6 communities.
And so that's why
70% of them happen to be the African American community.
Right.
All right, so we got a lot of work to do. And again, Reverend Jones, thank you and the West Garfield Community Partners for the work that you're doing, and certainly you guys are DFC. Matter of fact, we have, 3 in the city of Chicago, correct?
We have 3 in the city of Chicago, and we're excited. We're hoping that we're going to add more in the future. But we also know that the dollars that you all get for drug-free communities is just a beginning starter way to do it. One of my colleagues in San Antonio has expanded this program and where it becomes a major economic development educational component. And that's what we're hoping to do here in the city of Chicago as well. So it's a starter, but the key is breaking down those turfisms and begin to use environmental strategies, as Reverend Jones talked about.
Good.
As glad
he led us into that. Tell us talk to us about the environmental strategies and things that we can do as coalitions to improve on the work that we're doing.
Well, a lot of things can be done. A lot of things we talk a lot about why a lot of the crime and violence and drug sales are happening in our community. And one of the areas around environmental strategies that we need to focus in is what we call community norms. How are we really allowing the type of normal life to take place? What do we accept as normalcy?
Shootings.
And so if we are accepting normalcy as shootings, then we will get the negative impact of that. But if we got communities where there are churches, where there are citizens,
Lucy,
parents,
loud,
and where there are folks who are there, if we have those folks who are in those communities, then they have to really stand up and say, our normalcy in this community will not be these things.
Yeah, not Lucy,
That's
loud, as you're walking down 40, 30, 47, 39th Street.
Right.
I think, and you hit on, we certainly need more than this 30 minutes because when you talk about that I believe that there's a level of sensitization, if you will, that people become sensitized to what's happening, or desensitized to what's happening in the community. That means they have no feeling about it. It's like it's just normal. They're numb. It's just somebody gets shot. Okay, you can you have 13 to 14-year-old boys selling weed and 50-year-old men buying alcohol for kids or buying cigarettes for them after they done raised the Chicago has raised the age limit to 21. And they don't understand that those small things lead to bigger things, bigger conflicts, and bigger problems.
That's right.
And I was always taught that marijuana was a gateway drug to larger things, and I still believe that today. So you start off smoking a little weed, and you start off putting in. Then you want to get strong, so you dip it in some embalming fluid, or you put some fentanyl on it, which is for painkillers for folks with cancer. But which leads back to the mental problem, because I believe that it is coping.
Yes.
Most young people are smoking and drinking to mask some sort of pain.
Sure.
Yeah. And so, and I don't want to get too far off subject, but I know that the federal government has announced this new money to come in to deal with heroin, right?
Heroin, opiates.
Yeah. But see, here's what and I'm talking to the Black African American community today. We use heroin, of course, but our young people don't have a heroin using problem. We have a heroin selling problem. And so we got to figure out how we're going to balance it out. 290, you know what they call it? They call it the heroin highway.
Yeah.
And so a lot of these young, wealthy, whatever influenza, that's influenza is why they get high and snort heroin and shoot it. I don't know. Right. And I feel for the parents. I really do. And I'm not making light of that. But our young people are going to prison for it. Our young people are selling it. Our young people then take the money and then go buy weed laced with fentanyl and drink Molly's, and they shoot each other. And so therein lies a problem, Tracy. So go ahead. I'm sorry.
Here's an example of another environment strategy that is really in the city of Chicago that you all can do. There's a law called a deleterious law.
Yes, I'm familiar.
And that law has been on the books in Chicago for quite some time.
And thanks for taking me back, man, because I get on my soapbox.
That deleterious law allows coalitions like yours
Yeah.
and others like what was going on in West Garfield Park is to really use the law to change the environment where people hang out that are doing things that shouldn't be done. So we're finding that using that law really cleans up shops and parking lots and neighborhoods that is on the books, and that really the community has to bring those things to light. They have to say to their police officers who's part of the coalitions, to the city of Chicago representative, we want to impact the deleterious law in this particular area in our targeted neighborhood.
Okay.
And it begins to clean up. That's an environmental strategy approach that focuses on it. But now let me tell you, this is a problem in our communities, and we have to focus on 5 key areas. And we cannot do them individually.
All right.
We have to focus on the individual and how to bring employment and how to make sure they make the right decisions about drugs and crime and school and education. Focus on the individual. The second thing we have to focus in is their peers,
Yes.
their friends, to think about your friends that you had. And so we have to think about focusing on the individual, focusing on the peers. Then we have to also simultaneously focus on the family. Okay? And then after you focus on the family, we have to focus in on the school that the education is coming from, and focus in then on the community. So our coalition's role is to take all 5 of those key areas and provide and support those partners that are focusing in those 5 key areas simultaneously by finding additional revenue from the federal government and others that can help support that. But also, people are already doing that, make them accountable who are focusing on one of those individual areas.
Right. And great. Listen, that's why he's an expert. I'm telling you, listen, you guys have just gotten a wealth of knowledge as it relates to, even when it just talks about coalition. We're talking about coalition and coalition building. And he just gave us an example of how we can, those of us in our small pockets, wherever you are, can formulate and come together to begin to deal with some of the systemic issues that is facing your community.
And allow me to tell you.
Go ahead.
Allow me to tell our audience. Let me give you some examples of environmental strategy.
All right.
Today, when you get into your car, what do you do before you turn the car on? What do you put on?
My seatbelt.
That's an environmental strategy approach.
Yeah.
Over time, through community norms, through all the things that I talk about, we are now buckled.
Oh yeah.
What is the latest thing?
Buckle up or ticket.
That's right, enforcement.
Yeah, enforcement.
So here's another environmental strategy. Back in the 60s and 70s in this room, we could be doing what?
Smoking
in the cigarettes. Now you can't even smoke on the parks. That's an environmental strategy.
Yeah.
You can change things and change behaviors in a multiple strategy way, but you got to be on the same page.
Can't even chew your tobacco anymore.
Can't even chew tobacco no more. Here's another one. What the latest one is, don't text or drive.
Yes.
That's a new environmental strategy. You see things on commercials, you see people, you see parents telling their kids, don't text. It's taking all 5 of those domains and it's becoming a part of our livelihood. And what we got to do with our crime and with our issues in our community, we have to take charge and begin, meaning parents, meaning schools, meaning institutions, meaning individuals who really care about that, and lay down the turfisms and stand up for opportunities and change in our neighborhoods.
Like the Grand Boulevard Coalition.
Youth
came up with it. Most youths don't leave.
Yes.
Most youth, I'm like youths, like I'm at the ballpark. Most.
We know you're a Cubs fan.
No, die hard. You know that, right? Don't get me started.
Okay.
Most youth don't use.
Right.
Most youth don't use.
That's correct.
And so and that's really where we're going to be pushing that.
Yes.
Because just like click it or ticket.
Right. That's right.
Most youth don't use. I know I get on a rant and I come in and talk about things, but I just told you it was only 6 communities where the vast majority of these problems happen. So we have abundance of the communities are not dealing with these issues, but it doesn't get out there and it's not reported. And so we're not coming on to indict all youth. We know that most youth don't use.
That's correct.
But there are small pockets of youth who do use, and there are small pockets of people who need mental health services. And so this gentleman, Mr. Tracy Johnson, along with the Grand Boulevard Coalition, West Garfield Community Partners, and other DFC and SAMHSA programs, we're going to try to bring this information to the community,
yes,
and hope to work with coalitions and work with the community to prevent the problem so that, we wouldn't have to be sitting here 10 years from now talking about the same issues. We would be moving on to something else. Perhaps it is economic development,
sure,
technology and nanotechnology and all the other new things that are coming out. I mean, Apple just released the phone with
right,
no headphone socket.
Right.
So you got to know where this world is coming. They talking about driveless drivers.
That's right.
But you just punch in where you want to go and the car
Crazy.
takes off. So, change happens. And so we want to be a part of the change for the positive. But we don't want our people to be lost and perish. And, the good book say you will perish for the lack of knowledge. But, some of y'all have the knowledge. You perish because you just won't receive it or take heed to it. So
the final thing I want to talk about.
Go ahead, Brother Tracy. I'm sorry.
Is the piece around mental health promotion.
And I was going to go right into that.
SAMHSA and a lot of strategies lately has been, we want to worry about substance use, but before I even think about using that drug, I have a thought in my mind about issues that are going on in my life. And so what we're finding out is that if we can begin early on and working with those 5 domains that I told you about, individual, peer, family, school, and community, and really infusing those domains, the issues are that everybody deals with anger, anxiety, or depression.
Yeah.
Everybody at one point in their lives go through anger, anxiety, or depression. That's mental health promotion.
Yes.
And what we have to do in our communities is that when we see our families and our individuals and our kids deal with those 3 things, we have to give them the strategies that are effective to deal with anger, anxiety, and depression. Because if we don't, then later on it becomes not mental health promotion, it becomes mental health illness or mental illness.
Right.
And so before they get to the mental illness piece, we want to be able to impact through mental health promotion. When they're having the babies in their stomach, we want to be able to have that mom have to learn how to deal with anger, anxiety, and depression because that child is in her stomach.
And Brother Tracy, I agree with you so much, but one problem we seem to have in the African American community is the stigma around
Yes.
understanding that there are some folks in our community who need, as we talked about, mental health and are suffering from some mental illnesses. And it's okay to go seek help.
Yes,
I mean,
yes,
listen, God made doctors.
Mm-hmm.
Jesus made doctors. So, I know that there's some folks tell you go pray and pray and pray and pray. And that's great because prayer is good.
Right.
But at the end of the day, you have to see a professional.
Yes.
And there's some folks who need help based upon the traumatization that has taken place, some of the issues that we've already talked about, generations of substance abuse and all of those things. So I appreciate that.
I just want our viewers to understand, no matter if it's substance abuse or mental health promotion, there's this line of continuum. There's this prevention line, there's this early intervention line, there's this intervention or treatment line, then there's this recovery or mental health seeing a counselor line. So you have a line of continuum that we as individuals need to make sure that we're on target and working that in our community.
And in this last minute, Mr. Tracy Johnson, I want to present you with a certificate of appreciation, brother, from the Grand Boulevard Coalition for all your great work that you've been doing to help us to be successful and sustainable over these past 3 years. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Look forward to working with you over the next couple of years and into perpetuity as we develop greater strategies and begin to work with other coalitions to try to address some of these systemic problems that are happening in our community. So here, a certificate of appreciation on behalf of Grand Boulevard Coalition.
The members over in the Grand Boulevard to get to be a part of this Grand Boulevard Coalition.
Absolutely. And the way you do that, you can reach me at 312-420-5582. Again, 312-420-5582. That's the Grand Boulevard Coalition. You can reach me. Yes, I'm giving out my personal number, 312-420-5582. And I can talk to you more about how to get involved with our coalition. Listen, this has been a great show. Thank you to CAN TV, our guest, Brother Tracy Johnson. On behalf of all the members of the Grand Boulevard Coalition, I certainly appreciate you. Thank you so much. Until now and next week, use your common sense. God bless.